that was the first time when I met with a believer. Actually, my stepfather's cousin was a believer, and he talked to me about God and about Jesus, and I thought, I mean, that was the very first believer I met in my life, because under communism, I never heard anything about God or Jesus, and I thought, this guy came from the moon. I mean, nobody believes in God.
Like it or not, we are born into other people's stories. Our story is a sequel of the story of our ancestors. We are born into their dysfunctions, problems, and sickness. The sins of our ancestors leave marks on us, just as their virtue does. Of course, we are not determined to guide our story in the direction it was set by them, but we cannot ignore the impact that our story has on ours. Hi, and welcome to Mid-South Viewpoint. I'm Byron Tyler, and looking forward to sharing the story of Gabor Gresz, who is here today in Memphis visiting friends, now living here.
Right.
Moving to the U.S. from Hungary. In 2017, you got a new assignment with Crew. Now you're living just outside of Kansas City.
Yes. It's a great surprise to us also that, we lived all of our lives in Hungary. My wife and I, born in Hungary, we are Hungarians. And at age 50, the Lord changed the direction of our life and kind of called us to a place where we never thought we were going to be at and never wanted to live. And that's kind of like, but that's a familiar story from the Bible, right?
Yes.
I mean, sometimes God is taking us to places that we don't want to be at.
I remember learning about Abraham. He was a man of tents and stakes and altars and
right. I kind of feel like that a little bit because as our whole family now lives in 3 countries, 2 continents, scattered all around the world, but it's good.
You and your wife, Edna, been married 37 years.
30
years. Oh, I'm adding years to you.
That's fine. I mean, I know I look young.
No, you do. But God's blessed you with, is it 3 children?
3 children, right. We have a daughter who's almost 26. She lives in Scotland and a medical student. She has 1 more year. It's in a 5-year program. Her name is Rachel in English. We have a son who's 23 this month. And he studies in college back in Hungary, and we have a son who's 19, just graduated high school in Olathe South Public High School in Kansas.
Of course, I know you have been stateside numerous times, and,
right.
and we first met, how many years ago? It's been several years ago.
Oh gosh, at least 15. I 12 or something like that. I mean, I know that it had been over a decade.
Has it been that long?
Yeah.
It's crazy how time flies.
Right.
I didn't realize it had been that long.
It was.
But we kind of bumped into each other at my church. You were, I think, going to share in a class, and
right.
You looked like you were at a place trying to find your way, and we started talking, and that led to a radio show.
Yes.
And then you're back here now. But so what is the adjustment like, the transition been like for you, moving from Hungary and making a home in America?
Right. Well, it's very challenging on 3 main fronts. One is that, we left a really flourishing ministry back in Hungary, and when you're 50 years old and you spend pretty much all your life in ministry, and you were part of the ministry underground under communism and build the whole thing, you have a lot of connections and a lot of impact and influence, so there was a grieving process of leaving that. Also, there was a grieving process of leaving family members, and how our family is going to adjust to the new reality that actually we're living in 3 countries right now,
yes.
And on 2 continents in different time zones with the very limited opportunities to see each other, and how our kids are going to navigate their young adult lives, finding their ways, while we have elderly parents back at home. My mom is in a nursing home. So there's the family aspects. There is the ministry aspects, which, we stepped into a leadership to help give leadership to a new segment of Crew called church movements, and so that's the second. And the third aspect is, how do we navigate a completely new culture? And we came in a very tumultuous moment. Mm-hmm. in the U.S., where in the past 4.5 years, we have witnessed incredible, how to say, noise or lot of changes, and it seems like the U.S. is the epicenter of very seismic changes.
Which I think would underline maybe your call to come here because of the movement of what you're doing now, that the 21st century church is urbanization. 5 million people move into cities every month.
Every month, right.
And there are strong divisions.
Right.
And they're growing. Dwight L. Moody once said that if we reach the cities, we will reach the nation. If we fail the cities, they become a cesspool which will infect the entire nation.
Right. Well, I mean, look around what's going on right now. I mean, we really hesitated to come to the U.S. because it was hard for us to view the U.S. as a mission field, because wherever you go, you see a church, but the church is very visible, but not very powerful. Okay, the salt is most powerful when it's least visible, and as we moved to the U.S., we realized that, I mean, staggering realities of the U.S., because the fastest decline of the church in the world right now, it happens right here. 2.5 million people leave the church every single year. 4,000 churches closes. 200 million people are unchurched in this nation, which puts the U.S. the fourth largest unchurched nation in the world. Yeah. And if you compare that with Indonesia, which is the largest Muslim nation with 245 million people living there, every single year 2 million people become a believer in Jesus. So the estimation that if this continues, by 2040, Indonesia is going to be a majority Christian nation, while the U.S., which is the most resourced Christian nation in the world, with the most literature and the best teachings and the best churches, is in a fast track and declining.
Wow, what a contrast.
Yep.
I want to talk some about your backstory as we talk about stories being not shaping our life, but impacting our life, influencing our life in many ways. Fascism and communism had left their deep and cruel roots in Hungary, as you mentioned, but it also left really cruel and deep roots in your family.
Yes. Well, as you started, I mean, our we're born into those stories. We can't help it, and it's that those stories are marked by the whole society. Our family is not just an isolated, island. We're living in a society, and it impacts us. One side of our family, my mother's side of the family is Jewish, and so during when the Nazis came into power, some of my ancestors, well, actually, my great grandfather's 5 siblings was taken to Auschwitz. They perished. We don't even know their names. We have all of their wealth. It was a pretty well-off family. So, he was a business owner, and everything was lost. Now, when the other side of the family has noble backgrounds, and so my father's side, and so they were also outcast in the society after the communists came in, and they were viewed as the oppressor class. So they lost everything. My father, my grandfather, my grandmother, they were deported. I mean, I have in my basement, I have the letter from dated 1954, when they got a notice that in 24 hours they need to leave their house, and they only can take one suitcase with them. That's all. Everything was taken by the government. So they were deported to the countryside to live in a with others in a tiny house. They were in forced labor. So my grandfather got a stroke there. My great uncle was taken to the Soviet gulags for 11 years. No one knew if he was alive or not. And one day, he just showed up at the doorstep of his wife, who was waiting for him. But for after 11 years, we had family members who had been shot by the communist in 1953. He was just 23 years old, and was taken, and the communist was so cruel that after they shot him, they sent back the coat to the mother with the bullet holes.
The coat he was wearing.
Right.
Wow.
So, a couple of times they searched our home. There were all kinds of, that was just the reality. We got used to it.
Well, the 1950s were very dark in this newly established regime, the communist regime, because the war was over. You thought tragedy was over. It was just beginning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty amazing. It started with the Nazis, in the 30s, because that's when really the Jewish laws started to kick in, and then the war, and then the communists came in, and then 1956 we had the revolution against the Soviets, and that was destroyed, and it just like generations after generations living under oppression.
I think it was your great-grandfather was a Baptist minister.
Well, that was my wife's grandfather.
In the 1970s was handing out Bibles to Russian soldiers.
Right. And because of that, he was, he couldn't be a pastor anymore. So because listen, the church was controlled by the government, okay, and the way the church survived is that they tried to embrace the false theology, okay, so my wife's grandfather, who was a very faithful Baptist minister, and I wanted to get the gospel out. So when he walked by the it was really funny what he did. He was walking by the army base in the city where the Russians were, and he threw Bibles across the fence. But they caught him, of course, and they kicked him out from being a minister. So he had to work as an unskilled worker for the rest, until retirement or even after. And it was just a couple of years before retirement he lost his job as a pastor.
Wow.
But interrogations was common, even, and that was in the 80s when I became a believer. Okay, and maybe we're going to talk about that a little bit.
We're going to get there. We're not there yet. We want to get there, but as we fast forward from this period to the late 1960s, early 70s, really from birth through your childhood, your life was really marked with life-threatening diseases.
Right.
And also painful abuse.
Right. Well, probably because how my parents grew up. I mean, as an adult, you look back. I mean, what is their responsibility, and what is it that they were just the victim of what happened,
yes.
what history brought to them. But my father developed a major anger problems, and he became very, both physically and mentally and emotionally abusive, and which led to the point where my parents got divorced. But one of my very first memory of my father is that when I was 6 years old, I broke my leg. I couldn't walk on it. And he forced me to walk on it. And I remember that I was just, in tears trying to...
Was this without medical treatment? This
yeah,
was just
medical treatment.
Medical treatment.
No medical treatment. And he did not believe it's broken, and it was not a cast on it, and he was just forcing me to walk on my... And I wanted to please him. Okay, I got to please this authority figure in my life, even if it's brutally hurting me. And those things embed in you. Yeah. And kind of becomes a life pattern. And you start to, later in your adult life, you start to realize, gosh, I'm trying to please people, even at the cost of a horrible pain.
Yes.
Wow. So that's, but now later what happened, I had all kinds of diseases. So first they thought...
Did you actually spend 200 days in the hospital?
Yes, there was a year when I spent 200 days in the hospital. First they thought, back then it was, it was communism, okay? The medical, don't think about hospitals like here or the medical treatment like here, even in the 70s. It was very hindered, and so I developed all kinds of problems. First, they thought I have leukemia. Then they said, no, it's not. Then they said I have some kind of kidney failure. Then it's not. And I was so sick I couldn't walk. So for the weekend, my mom carried me home on her back because my father was not willing to drive to the hospital and pick me up. And then when they got a divorce, the judge, I was 8. It was a tragic moment in my life, because although my father was abusive, at least I felt that there is some kind of security in my life as they were together. And my mother left, who was the only security in my life, with my sister, and I stayed with my father. And back then I did not understand how, what was the arrangement and how did this happen. Later I learned that, it was my father threatened my mom, and that there was all kinds of, violent thing involved in that. But I developed a very severe asthma and allergy. It was so severe that the doctors thought that, I'm going to die by the age of 18 or 20.
Wow.
And so I was in the hospital again. So at age 12, it was so dire that my mom went to the court and wanted to get me back, and it was a very difficult process. But at age 12, I ran away from my father while there was this whole court procedure, and I lived with him, and he terrorized me. And but finally, I had to run away, and he chased me with the police and my mom, and my mom was hiding me in a hospital.
At 10, you developed asthma.
Right.
Very severe, where you spent another many months in the hospital.
Right. Back then, the medication, especially that was available in Hungary under communism, it was very limited. So there were numerous times when the ambulance rushed me to the hospital, and they put me in oxygen, tent, and all kinds of, trying to revive me or bring me back to life. And truly, there was just no hope. My mom was desperate, trying to save me in this whole situation. Finally, the judge, when I was about 13 or 14, almost, it was over a year-long process. The judge decided that, if they want to save my life, they have to take to my mom, and my father cannot see me. And the reason why the judge decided that, because my mom was hiding me in the hospital. And one day, out of the blue, I just looked out on the window, and I saw my father walking into the hospital. It was in another city. And I ran to the doctor. I hardly could breathe and say, my father is coming in, and he's chasing me. And then he said, okay, come down. And then, they talked to him. And the doctor came into to the room where I was. Your father want to see you and just want to talk to you. And I was so scared that I hid it in the attic of the hospital so they couldn't find me. And that's what changed the whole course of the case. Because when the judge asked that, my father, did you meet with your son? And my father said, my son is not ready to ask for forgiveness.
Wow.
And that's how the judge saw through.
Thankfully, he saw that.
Right.
In the middle of a life crisis with the pain, the abuse, and the fear, a life-changing moment occurred at 14 for you.
Right. Well, actually, we were just over this ordeal with my father, and I moved with my mom and my stepfather, my stepfather had a daughter from the previous marriage. That was the first time when I met with a believer. Actually, my stepfather's cousin was a believer, and he talked to me about God and about Jesus, and I thought, that was the very first believer I met in my life, because under communism I never heard anything about God or Jesus, and And I thought, this guy came from the moon. I mean, nobody believes in God. But as he explained to me that God is a father, a loving father who cares for me, who's not abusive, who loves me, I thought, I mean, that's what I want. So I said a prayer. I remember that. I was laying in my bed, a dark night. I was struggling with my fear, with all kinds of anxiety, depression, everything. And I said, God, if you're really out there, I want you to be my father. He took it more seriously than I did, obviously. And that just, he just, completely changed my life. I mean, there was total hopeless. I mean, I was so hopeless that when I was in 8th grade, I was so behind in school and everything that I was stuttering. I mean, even at age 20, I still stuttered. The teacher told my mom at 8th grade that this kid is so stupid that don't even bother to send him to high school. So it just so that's how drastic the change for me was to become a believer.
And this was a serious commitment because you were being forced by those in your school to become a member of the Young Communist Party.
Because the normal thing was that when you go to high school, is that you join to the Young Communist Party. It's called KISZ in Hungarian. It's like the English word KISS, but it's just the acronym for the Young Communist Party. And if you wanted to go to higher education, you had to be a member of that. It was just like, oh, it's a normal thing. Otherwise, we are not going to accept you. And at 14, I was already a believer. That summer was just totally transformative in my life. And I said, I knew that I can't do that. And now I knew believers who joined the Young Communist Party just because of, well, that's the way we do life. That's how we get to university. But for me, it was like, no, I cannot do that. So I said to the teacher, I won't do that. And because I don't know why, I just felt that. I don't judge those who did. Okay, I mean, that was their path. My path was, no, I can't compromise this way.
Well, there was a couple that influenced you and helped disciple you, an American missionary couple who were living there, Mike and Kathy Uno, who were living there in Hungarian under different job titles. They weren't missionaries because they're not allowed. Right. But it was through that friendship and that relationship that they helped you to grow in this new faith that you had.
Yes. I'm very thankful for them because they saw how, even though I was a believer, but because of my upbringing, I was struggling with a lot of issues, insecurity, fear, and unfortunately at that time, my mother was going through a second divorce from my stepfather, and the situation at home was just terrible. Yeah. Okay, we lived in one room. All of us lived in one room. Okay, it was horrible. So they opened their home. They lived in Hungary, and they had cover jobs, and they opened their home, and for 18 months I could live with them and actually saw a Christian family the very first time, and they taught the Bible to me, and Mike discipled me, and I learned to share my faith, and I went to dorms.
You were secretly meeting with students.
Oh yeah,
sharing the Jesus film.
Right.
And in the summer of '85, you were arrested for sharing your faith.
Right. Well, it was really fun. Well, look. Well, at that moment, it was just like, when you're 18, 19 years old, you said, "Oh, I don't care anything about anything. I just want to do what I believe I need to do." And with one of my good friend, we thought we had a free summer technically because we were in between schools, and we're gonna just share Christ. So there's a huge lake in Hungary, and we went from one town to another. We had a tent where we slept and we moved, and so we shared Christ with everything that moved. Okay. Now one day we were coming out from the water, and the secret police was there. Okay, so they arrested us, and they confiscated Bibles. They interrogated us. They searched my mom's home, and of course, that cut my opportunity on that year to go to university. Just a year later, they allowed me to go in the evening course.
Yeah.
Where they said I'm a bad influence on the young people, on my peers.
Right.
So, but that was it was scary at the moment.
And that was a tough time for you too, because
Right.
of that not allowing you to go to day school and take the classes. You also were working like a 7 at night to 7 in
Right.
the morning job.
Right.
What were you doing in that job?
Well, there was a guy who was manufacturing plastic parts. Okay, so there's those big machines where you melt the plastic and then it produces it pushes. So it was a good paying job, and I needed that because I had to support myself fully, and also help my mom as she was going through the divorce, and we moved into a one-room apartment, another one-room apartment, and my sister was giving birth to her child, and she moved in with us. So actually, I lived in the hallway of our home, so I put down a mattress when I slept. But typically what happened is because I had night shifts, the place that I worked had a sauna, which was not used. So after my night shift, I slept in the sauna for 4 hours, then went on my thing and went to the class at evening. So it was fun.
Oh my goodness!
When you're young, you can do that.
You can do that, right?
Okay. No, I couldn't.
Gabor, this has been wonderful sharing your journey and ultimately how we have seen today how hope in Christ has come alive in your heart and has given you purpose. And there's more to the story that we're going to have to continue on the next program, if you can hang around. I would like to continue the story because there's so much more I want to talk about is the healing process. I can't help but think there are those listening who have been in their own traumatic life experiences, maybe similar to yours, maybe not as intense as yours, but still have struggled, maybe have felt there is no hope. We have discovered that the hope is found in Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And through the living word of Scripture that provides encouragement and direction and purpose for us. And we want to continue that next time. But as we say goodbye on this show, if somebody wanted to know more, now your story is in a little book that I have here in my hand.
Right.
And this is available if somebody, can people get copies of this?
Yeah, they can actually download it if they want it. If they go on Grace for City, which is my name, GRESZ, forcity.com, they can download that little booklet. The title would be that they need to look for a story that should never have happened, hence deserves to be told.
Yes, and that's available. And plus, your website, as you mentioned, GRESZ, forcity, F-O-R, city.com. And it is an incredible website. This story is there, stories about the ministry, what is going on in the urban work with the church movements, and it's a great site. So I encourage our friends to go visit that site to learn more. But what we're going to do right now is say goodbye, but come back next time and continue the conversation.
Thank you.
Well, friends, that's all the time we have on this edition of Mid-South Viewpoint. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Byron Tyler, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.